Have you ever been talking to someone about politics and just felt like you're on two completely different planets? Like, you can be sitting there laying out all the facts and figures about why something is right or wrong, but none of it seems to be connecting. Yeah, I've definitely been there too, and it's an incredibly isolating experience because we all operate in this world with a basic sense of what's right or wrong, and the assumption is that we're all operating on a similar wavelength. But the reality is, there's actually a lot more variation in how we come up with what's right or wrong than you might think. It sounds obvious, but we all care about different things. We have different backgrounds, different upbringings, different traumas, and that creates different sets of values. Combine that with propaganda, social conditioning, and our own cognitive biases, and trying to make moral arguments about right or wrong starts to get really tricky. And especially in politics, because everybody thinks they're right and no one likes to think that they're wrong. And this is where psychology is really helpful, because if we're trying to change people's minds, it helps to understand how the mind works in the first place. So the questions really are, how are our morals formed anyway? What values do we all actually have in common? And then how can we use that information to have political conversations that are more likely to actually bridge the gaps between us? Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, we'd really appreciate it if you could drop us a like and subscribe to our channel. It's one of the easiest and cheapest ways to support what we're doing. At The Conscious Citizens, we're on a mission to share the resources and education that you need in order to make everyday advocacy feel more approachable. So be sure to like and subscribe, and also hit that bell button so you're always notified when we upload something new. Alright, back to the video. So where does our sense of right or wrong come from? Are we just naturally born with a set of morals, or are we taught them as we grow up? This is the classic nature versus nurture debate. The answer, like most things, is a bit of both. As the psychologist Gary Marcus explains, the initial organization of the brain does not depend that much on experience. Nature provides the first draft, which experience then revises. Basically, we aren't a blank slate when we're born. We're all born with a certain set of core values that give us an instinctual sense of what's right or wrong, and then different cultures, upbringings, and social groups build upon these core values to create their own moral codes. That's how you end up with vastly different cultures still caring about the same basic things. And essentially, this is the basic idea behind the moral foundations theory, which was developed by Jonathan Haidt and a team of other psychologists starting in 2004. Through their research, they were able to group the common elements between various cultures around the world into 5 different categories that they called moral foundations, because these are the values that all people are born with that get built upon throughout life. Here are the original 5 moral foundations. The first one is the care foundation, which is about our natural desire to take care of each other and protect the people most at risk in our communities. This is because of our evolutionary history as communal creatures who need to lean on each other to survive. Our abundance of care for children as a society is rooted in this foundation. That's why we see people like Miss Rachel advocating for Palestinian children in Gaza, regardless of if it affects her career, because it aligns with her core values. The second is the fairness reciprocity foundation, which is about our expectation for equality and reciprocal altruism. And this foundation underlies a lot of our notions of justice and basic rights. This is where you get cultural norms like the golden rule that many of us are taught as children. Do unto others what you would like done to you. This foundation also drives many mutual aid efforts in our communities, which prioritize reciprocity in their core values. Third is the in-group loyalty foundation, which is about our tendency to form groups and to be fiercely loyal to the groups that we form. And this also comes from our history as communal animals that needed groups to survive and form our own identity. The die-hard loyalty that many have for sports teams, cities, are common examples of this foundation in everyday life. And in politics, this foundation is what motivates things like party loyalty, patriotism, and nationalism. The fourth foundation is authority and respect, which is about our natural tendency to respect leadership to a certain extent. This is rooted in our evolutionary history as primates that typically have hierarchical power structures. And we see this foundation manifest in many areas throughout our societies, whether that's the expectation of respect for parental figures, or even symbols like a police badge. The fifth is the purity and sanctity foundation, which is about our instinctual dislike for things that we consider dirty or off-putting. As you can imagine, this foundation underlies a lot of our desire for cleanliness, but also our drive to live more healthy and pure lives, which can mean a lot of different things to different people. Purity could mean a daily gym routine to keep your body healthy and pure from toxins, a daily prayer ritual to keep your spirit pure, or even abstaining from sex before marriage to be perceived as more pure by a future partner. Now, those are the original 5 moral foundations that Haidt and his collaborators laid out, but since their original original paper in 2004, they've added 2 more. In 2012, they introduced the Liberty Foundation, which is about our natural desire for autonomy and freedom. This foundation pushes us to come together in solidarity to take down oppressors, and it's the foundation that drives most liberation movements around the world. And in 2020, the Honor Foundation was developed, which is about how our self-worth is partially based on how others perceive us. Toxic masculinity is rooted in this foundation, as men have been expected to embody certain behaviors or otherwise face social shame. We're all born with these 7 moral foundations, and then as we age, certain ones are valued more or less in our lives. Different cultures and social groups around the world have created thousands of unique mixes of these 7 moral foundations, resulting in thousands of unique moral codes. And our unique mix of moral foundations is reflected in our political views too. The researchers behind the moral foundations theory set up a website called yourmorals.org to see if there's a difference between liberals and conservatives. And generally their data found that liberal people around the world tended to value the foundations of care and fairness higher, while conservatives tended to value the foundations of authority, loyalty, and purity higher. And it's these differences between which moral foundation that we value most that can often make it feel like you're talking to a wall when discussing politics with someone that has different views than you. It's often because we're using arguments that are designed to appeal to a different moral foundation than the one that they care about the most. Like if I was using a talking point that was rooted in the care foundation, but they value authority the most, it's probably not going to get anywhere. And by adjusting how we speak about the issues that we care about to our audience, we can hopefully actually get our point across and find some common ground. Basically, the moral foundations theory, when used correctly, is a handy strategic tool to help you more effectively reach your audience, whether that's with a single person, a crowd of people, or even with larger political campaigns and on-the-ground actions. And to give you a sense of what I mean, I spoke with my good friend and experienced activist, Vivian.
Hey Ray, how's it going?
Who ran a campaign in 2016 with Doctors Without Borders against Pfizer, the second richest US pharmaceutical company, to try to pressure them into lowering the price of the pneumonia vaccine.
Pneumonia is the #1 killer of children around the world, and there's a vaccine, but we live in a capitalist society that prevents these medicines from being affordable.
And after years of negotiations and not making much progress, Doctors Without Borders decided to apply public pressure and launched a campaign called A Fair Shot.
You know, when you talk to people about this, to me it seemed really simple. Like, you should care about this. There's a lot of kids dying. But actually, when you don't see children dying from this disease in your country, it may not be immediately the most important thing that you care about. We were able to mobilize over 400,000 people to sign our petition and engage with us. And what we wanted people to understand was really think about what 2,500 kids in a day feels like. We printed out all the names of those who signed the petition, and we delivered it to Pfizer in a baby crib that we walked down to their headquarters, and then we put 2,500 flowers in the crib to represent how many kids die from pneumonia in a day. We delivered this, and Pfizer let us do our thing, and then they immediately brought the crib inside to their office so that it wouldn't remain on the streets and draw more attention. But the funny story is that they didn't count for the crib not fitting into their elevators, so it actually had to sit inside their office for a whole day. And we heard that this sparked a lot of internal conversation with their employees. It started conversations internally that made Pfizer have to address it.
The action was not only successful in gaining public support, it also got Vivian and Doctors Without Borders into a boardroom with Pfizer executives. But as Vivian points out, what works for one audience doesn't necessarily work for another.
The next day, we took the same messaging to their shareholder meeting. And again, we're saying, like, 2,500 kids die a day. Essentially, why don't you lower the price of the vaccine? And we were essentially booed out of the shareholder meeting because in that scenario where it's all shareholders and the C-suite staff, they care probably more about loyalty, right? Like loyalty to the company and loyalty to the bottom line, which is essentially profit. And so the messaging of care is just not appealing to them. And it was a very, stark difference from what we felt the day before, where we had a bunch of support and this really dramatic moment of delivering the petition, to the next day getting booed out of the shareholder meeting.
Yeah, big roller coaster.
Yeah, and that's when we realized why we need to target our messaging according to who we're speaking to. as an activist, someone that's planning action, it's really important for you to understand your audience and which foundation are they operating from, right? So oftentimes that could be maybe the same or it could be different. And it's really important to understand which foundation is most important to them so that then you can design the messaging to engage in that foundation.
And that's what they did. They went back to the drawing board, they refined their messaging, kept up the pressure, and eventually were successful in pressuring Pfizer to lower the price of the pneumonia vaccine for humanitarian organizations like Doctors Without Borders. Though the fight to make that price available to everybody still continues. So let's try using the moral foundations theory in a conversation. Let's pick an easy topic, like Israel-Palestine. If I was talking to someone that valued the CARE Foundation the most, I would try to pull on their heartstrings and talk about the fact that millions of Palestinians are being intentionally starved while humanitarian aid is being blocked right at the border, or how Gaza has the highest population of child amputees anywhere in the world. If they value fairness and reciprocity, then I might talk about how Israel's imposed starvation and bombing campaigns are collective punishment for Palestinians who have nothing to do with Hamas. If they seem to value loyalty the most, like if they're an America First Republican, then I may talk about the exorbitant amount of foreign aid that we give to Israel, which helps fund their free healthcare and education, while the US crumbles from neglect. If they value authority and respect, then I'd perhaps focus on the breaking of international law and the trampling of respect for international bodies like the UN. If they value purity and sanctity, then they may respond to arguments about the destruction of invaluable cultural monuments in Palestine, or the insane amount of pollution that's been caused by the genocide. If they value the Liberty Foundation the most, I'll talk about how Palestinians have been living under occupation and apartheid for 77 years, stripped of their basic freedoms, pushed off of their land, and prevented from ever returning home, which done to any group would obviously make them want to fight back. And if they value honor the most, I talk about how Israel is basically a pariah nation at this point that is causing its own downfall, the same way that apartheid South Africa was just before their eventual collapse. Now that's just one example, but the point is that there are many different ways that we can talk about the same issue. And if we want to be the most effective, we have to be thoughtful about our tactics. So next time you're trying to figure out how to speak about a political issue or planning some sort of campaign or action, try using the moral foundations theory as a guide to figure out how to tailor your messaging to your audience. After all, this is part of the vital strategic thinking that we need to be doing in order to effectively communicate and build true people power across the entire world. Otherwise, we're just stuck spinning in circles and burning ourselves out, which helps no one. But if we take the time to prepare, strategize, and analyze the mental terrain that we're trying to navigate, we'll have a much better chance of getting where we want to go. Now, if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. That's the easiest way to help this channel. And if you want to learn more about the moral foundations theory, then come check out theconsciouscitizens.org. On our website, we have an entire write-up about the moral foundations theory with additional links where you can learn more. You can get access to it for free, along with an entire directory of hundreds of more helpful resources by signing up at theconsciouscitizens.org. And you can help us keep this project completely free and support these videos by becoming a paid subscriber for as little as $2 a month.